Now our next speaker will be Emilie Arnaud-Nguyễn. Emilie is currently teaching paper analysis at the Sorbonne University, Paris 1, and at Institut National du Patrimoine. She's also a freelance paper conservator, and she will be telling us about analysis of Tocharian paper documents stored at the BNF, so Bibliothèque nationale de France, revealing connections between Central Asian people.
First of all, I want to thank the organizers for having invited me to present the results of part of my thesis. Well, the purpose of my study was to identify the manufacturing process and the raw materials of paper documents that were discovered in Dunhuang and in the sword of Kucha. This ancient Oasis kingdom was located on the northern Silk Road along the Taklamakan Desert in modern Xinjiang. The Silk Road designates overland routes that form a complex and erratic network divided into a northern and a southern route with two connecting points starting at Dunhuang and Kashgar. The Oasis city of Kucha was a flourishing kingdom thanks to trade. Merchants, artists, officials, monks, or servicemen came from various places such as other oases, the Gandhara region, the Indian subcontinent, and China. Such eclectic population met at Kucha, leading to exchanges of beliefs, artistic patterns, crafts, materials, as well as technologies. The arrival of Buddhism from India led to the adoption of a writing system as well as writing supports. Originally, numerous materials were used to write on, such as wooden plank, leather, but also palm leaves from India, birch bark from Gandhara, and paper from China. Paper was invented in China around the 2nd century before our era. Herein, the material and the technology traveled along the Silk Road, spreading slowly westward. The process of the technology transfer remains unknown. Basically, paper can be made anywhere as long as vegetal materials and water are available. The main issue of my study was to determine if papers used by local people was made locally or imported from China. My analysis focused on a corpus of paper documents stored at the Bibliothèque nationale de France from the Pellieu collection. Most of that collection consists in fragments of manuscripts that were found buried in the ground of ruined buildings of ancient Buddhist sites that were ransacked and burnt. The interest for the region arose in the 19th century with the discovery of the Boer manuscript by an Indian army officer, the Major General Sir Hamilton Bower. He bought a Brahmi manuscript made of 51 leaves of birch bark that was found in the vicinity of Kucha. This discovery revealed the Buddhist past of the region and sparked the interest of scholars. Since then, an international race for archaeological treasures began. Explorers came from Russia with, among others, Dmitry Clements, Mikhail Berezovsky, and Sergei Oldenburg. From Great Britain with Aurel Stein, from Germany with Albert Grünwedel and Albert von Lecoq, from Japan, which missions were founded by the Count Otani, and at last, the French mission led by Paul Pellieu. The French team spent 6 months digging in the Kucha territory. They ended up in the Modao cave of Dunhuang. Up to now, the Kuchan paper documents had never been analyzed. And the history of papermaking technology in Central Asia is fragmentary known. Actually, since the primary article of the German botanist Julius von Wissner, only a few papers were analyzed out of the tens of thousands of paper documents and paper artifacts that were discovered in the region. My study focused on 2 corpora, the macroscopic analysis, which comprises 332 papers, and microscopic analysis, which studies 62 samples. Macroscopic analysis consists in identifying the trace of manufacture by observing the paper under natural light, raking light, and transmitted light. The microscopic analysis consists in removing a tiny piece of paper and observing the key features of fibers under the microscope. Before listing the traces of manufacture and information they provide, we will define what paper is and how it is made. So please, I do apologize, I will go fastly. So we will have here the main key stages, but keep in mind that there can be many, that stages can be repeated once or twice, that they can be removing impurities stages, and that also they can have many additions that I will not go too deep here because I'm lacking time. So we will have the main stages to make paper. And basically, paper consists in a mat of vegetable fibers that have been beaten in the presence of water, collected on a screen, and dried. The raw materials of the pulp can originate from recycled plant-made artifacts, such as ropes, nests, and clothes, or from fresh fibers that are collected from the stem of plants or the inner bark of branches of bushes. The main goal of the pulping is to separate the fibers, and the process followed may vary according to the period or the region. The recycled materials and the plants are retted. The branches can be steamed in order to facilitate the barking. Then, fibers are cooked in an alkaline lye and beaten. Two types of mold can be used to form the sheet. The floating mold consists in a textile that is stretched and bound on a wooden frame. The pulp is spread on the water and spread evenly, or not, by hand. The ancient dipping mold is composed of a wooden frame, a sieve, and two wooden sticks. The dipping mold is made in a vat filled with water and fibers. The papermaker scoops the fibers, and after draining the excess water, sheets are brushed on a wall or on a wooden plank to dry. Those different tools imprint different traces and different marks within the paper structure. The corpus was mostly produced between the 7th and the 8th centuries. The great majority of documents was written in the local Kucha language, that is Tocharian B. The contents of the documents is always of a religious nature, except for the Chinese texts that were written by troops stationing in the city. In fact, during the Enshi Protectorate, Kucha had become the headquarters of the 4 garrisons of Enshi, and the Chinese authority took control of the Kuchian administration. The format of the sheet depends on the theme. The traditional Indian format, the pustaka, was dedicated to Buddhist manuscripts. Loose leaves were adopted for correspondence, and the Chinese format, the scroll, for account books. The sheet forming process could not always be identified because of the paper opacity or the poor state of conservation. However, lead lines were observed in 20% of the corpus. They prove they are, I will show you. They are never even, they are mostly curved. So I don't know if you can see, it's not straight. You always have some kind of curvy and intermittent. So you cannot see, you cannot follow the lead line from the beginning of the sheet to the end. And so this is typical of a soft material of the sieve, such as reed or straw, and basically both are easily available in the natural environment of the Kucha Oasis because it is growing along the irrigation canals. Lead lines were numbered from 5, most of the lead lines are numbered from 5 to 6 per centimeter. Chain lines are rarely observable. That can be explained by an intensive and long-term use of the sieve, which is supported by the presence of repairs and mending. So, as you can see, sometimes it just disappears. So you have something very clear, a clearer trace. That is the trace of the lead lines. So lead lines is because all these lines of the sieve are sewn together with, it can be horsehair or hemp thread. And so sometimes it disappears. Or you see, here it is not straight, it is a bit oblique, and then it disappeared, and then up, it comes back here. So it means that it was so much used that they have to repair it several times, again and again, to use it and not make a new one. traces of a cloth sewn onto the movable sieve were observed. This adaptation was likely implemented by the least experienced papermakers. It slows water drainage, providing papermakers with more time to spread fibers evenly. Then it minimizes the imprint of the screen structure on the paper, which produces paper with a smoother surface. Finally, that impedes the presence of chain lines and lead lines. As a consequence, it questions its use for paper makers that show no mark at all of the mold. The distribution of the fibers is even in 20% of the corpus, while 30% of papers show cloudy fiber distribution. The average thickness of papers ranges from 0.1 to 0.2 millimeter, with little disparity along the same sheet. Only 14% of papers show the presence of defects. The commonest flaws are folds, skin areas, and water drops. That later, here, it is here. You see, something is darker, and it looks like in relief, something in relief. So it means that they use fresh, the papermaker used, there was supposedly a tiny hole, so he used fresh pulp up just to put over the hole, and now it's fine. The paper can be sold without any trouble. So microscopic observation can provide evidence about the fiber composition and about the pulping process. The presence of threads, colored or not, and of fabrics revealed that the paper was made from recycled fibers. Papers comprise clumping of fibers, which reveal that the cooking and beating stages were shortened or even skipped. The presence of impurities was observed in the form of bark and cereals. The first is embedded in the fiber web. So bark was probably added after the pulping process because you see it is not crushed, it hasn't been cooked, it is quite well preserved, but it is embedded in the fiber web under the coating, so possibly added after the pulping process. The bark, it was not possible to identify its origin, so we don't know why it was added. It could be for insecticidal purpose, or even odoriferous if the bark was smelly or something agreeable, we suppose. On the contrary, cereals are very well preserved and did not seem to have been processed. So we supposedly think it was originated from the environment of the conservation for centuries that was surrounded by fields. The text could be written with a brush or with a wooden pen. That too requires a smooth and flat surface. That is why paper were coated with a mixture of gypsum, a starch paste. And so allow me, so here, I put lines because I don't know if you can see some kind of traces like that. And this is traces of the brush. So I mean, when the coating was applied that way, and so it was brushed, and you still have the traces of the brush. I know, I tried to coat papers, and I had the same traces, so I can say that is it. The presence of selenite crystal of gypsum proved that the material was not sorted out, but promptly mixed with the binding material before being applied on the sheet of paper. Then the sheet was polished, so it became glossy. In the end, the paper was smooth, glossy, and soft, which proved that papermakers found solutions to overcome the blemishes of the sheets. When a brush was used to write, the paper was sized with starch paste. That operation was not properly achieved, as proof that the presence of ink bleeding. So you can see here that everything looks fine, and here we have really the ink just cut into the porous paper, because paper is a porous material, and so it's just like a bleed, I mean. So when they apply it, they should probably did it very promptly, and in the end, the ink was too much absorbed by the paper. So, and they could also be traced, before writing, before copying text, monks were tracing ruled lines that can be traced with ink, brown or white, or traced with a sharp tool, as you can see here, and imprint within the paper. The composition of ink, was made from the combustion of the soot of the combustion of pine tree and the binding material from hide glue. And there were many additives such as egg yolk or pomegranate peel and the perfume such as cloves. Text could have been corrected by a layer of coating that covers the wrong letter. The writer can be copied and pasted on the wrong part, or the information can be crossed out. At some time, the paper availability might have been an issue. In fact, some documents of several leaves that were pasted together. So you can see here, we have two types of paper. We have the paper of the edges and the paper in the middle. And basically, the writing was dated, and so the middle was written before the edges. So we don't know what happened, basically. Is it a correction? So it was just a mistake on the edges, or maybe the edges were too degraded, so the sheet could not be handled properly. And instead of having a new sheet of paper and copying completely the text, they decided to tear, and not really regularly. As you can see, it is not straight. It has been just torn off promptly and pasted the wrong part, or re-put the text correctly. Another method consists in recycling Chinese scrolls. Sheets of the pustaka format are cut in the scroll sheet. Then, the Chinese restos are pasted together and block verso can be written on into Korean. Microscopic analyses reveal that the pulp was mostly made from recycled fibers. That is not surprising when considering the desertic environment of the Kucha Oasis. Every resource available was probably exploited and recycled as long as possible. Regarding the fiber composition, the traditional rami hemp duo is the commonest material, which did not exclude the addition of other textile fibers, such as sun hemp. Sun hemp is an Indian fiber that was traditionally used to make ropes and cordages. Its presence here enhances contacts and exchanges between Kucha and the Indian subcontinent. 18% of the corpus was made from fresh fibers from paper mulberry and mulberry tree. So here we put mulberry fibers, because we have some features that fit to the paper mulberry features, but many features that do not fit. So basically we thought, or we hypothesized, that those fibers were from the same family of the paper mulberry, but a different genera. So as for the moment, we are lacking reference material because it was not identified and not described in any other publication. And so what is different from other and quite surprising is the mixture of recycled and fresh fibers. Here, that's it. So a small part of the corpus was made with a mixture of fresh and recycled fibers. That characteristic is rare and was reported only for Central Asian paper. In the corpus, we identified fibers of paper mulberry, mulberry trees, and Daphne species mixed with rami, hemp, and sun hemp. The presence of swelling and the shortness of fibers indicate that fresh fibers could have been recycled. That hypothesis is supported by a piece of cloth of the Pelliot collection that is composed of 3 pieces of textile, red numbers, and a piece of paper, blue number. It is possible that this type of artifact was recycled to make paper. The presence of associated cells such as parenchyma, hair, pitted vessel, epidermis, and crystal is surprising, as they are generally removed by the pulping process. So maybe the cooking stages was shortened. The manuscript have remained for centuries in poor environmental condition that is buried into the ground or in open air around wooden buildings. That explains the presence of mud, sand, mica, creases, losses, burn mark and calcinated edges, remains of insects, feathers, and water damage. The use of manuscript and their handling left visible traces within the paper. As an example, that medical magical manuscript had to be carried on the patient to be effective. Hence, the presence of creases and aligned holes as the sheet was folded and piled on the sick. Some traces are likely to touch upon the body skirt of the book, such as the presence of stains of various colors. Yeah, and also aligned creases that seemed intentional, and for that one, it was not, nobody knows what was achieved or performed with that manuscript and why monks just folded it several times in different senses. If you have any idea, please tell me. So monks took great care of manuscripts. Firstly, repairing the word of the Buddha was considered as an act of merit, and then it allows the to use the manuscript longer. So we can observe the presence of repairs, such as strips of coated paper and stitching holes. Sometimes, the former presence of a repair strip has left visible traces on the surface. As a conclusion, macroscopic and microscopic analyses show that the paper was made mostly with recycled fiber. The pulping process was promptly achieved, as the cooking and beating stages might have been shortened or even skipped. The sheet forming was realized mostly with a dipping mold. Sometimes the textile was sewn onto the sieve. In the end, paper makers managed to provide a white paper with a smooth surface by coating and polishing it. The place of finding, namely Kucha and Dunhuang, does not impact the paper typology. Okay, and so in the end, we came to the conclusion or the assumption that the paper was probably made locally, because if you compare paper made in China at the same period, really nothing to do. Thank you for your attention.